You hear about it all the time, right? Another government shutdown threat, another huge bill just stuck in Congress. It's so easy to just feel like Washington is totally gridlocked. Well, today, we're going to look at the actual data behind those headlines. We'll see just how deep this divide has gotten, what it's costing all of us, and how it's creating this power vacuum that is literally reshaping the American government. Okay, let's dive in.
I mean, seriously, have you ever looked at the news and just thought the whole system seems stuck? That nothing important ever really gets done? If you have, you are definitely not alone. It's this widespread frustration, this feeling that the gears of government have just ground to a complete halt.
But here's the thing. That feeling, that sense that the system is broken, it's not just in our heads. It is a measurable, provable reality, and it's backed up by decades of political data. So let's actually look at the evidence and see for ourselves how wide this great divide has become.
Okay, this chart right here tells a really powerful story. What you're looking at is the ideological gap between the two parties in Congress. You see, for decades, from the 20s all the way through the 70s, they were actually pretty close. There was a lot of overlap. But then look what happens around the late 1970s. That gap just starts to widen and widen and widen, until it becomes a giant chasm. We are now more polarized than at any time since the chaotic years right after the Civil War. That's a long time.
And here's a really crucial piece of this story. It's not a simple case of both sides sprinting away from the center equally. The data on this slide shows that while the Democratic Party has shifted a bit to the left, the main reason that gap has gotten so huge is because Republican legislators have been moving steadily, and much more dramatically, to the right. It's a trend that's been building for decades.
So, okay, the parties are super far apart. So what? What does that actually mean for the country? Well, this deep, deep divide has a very high cost. It creates a state of near-constant gridlock, and that has a direct and pretty damaging effect on the basic day-to-day functioning of our government.
You know, at its core, Congress has three main jobs: pass laws to solve our problems, pass a budget to actually pay for the government, and confirm the key people needed to run it. Well, polarization has thrown a giant wrench into all three of these fundamental duties. Let's look at the evidence for each one.
First up, making laws. This chart makes it painfully clear. See the black line climbing higher and higher? That's polarization. Now look at the gray bars. They represent major landmark laws getting passed. As the black line goes up, the gray bars just plummet. It's no coincidence that the most productive times in Congress were also the least polarized. Today, getting a big bipartisan bill passed is incredibly rare.
Next, let's talk about the budget. This visual tracks how Congress does or doesn't do the annual budget. For over 20 years, it was like clockwork, a really consistent system. But watch what happens after 1998. The whole process just falls apart. I mean, in a lot of recent years, Congress can't even agree on a basic budget outline, which leads to those government shutdowns and just constant uncertainty. Experts have a name for this. It's a shift from regular order to regular disorder.
And number 3, appointments. To actually run the government, a president needs their team in place. But getting those people approved by the Senate has turned into a slow, agonizing process. Back in the 60s, it took, on average, about 11 days. By 2017, that had ballooned to 93 days. And we're not just talking about a few famous judges. This affects hundreds of key positions, leaving important agencies without leaders for months and months.
So what happens when Congress is this paralyzed? Well, it creates a power vacuum. And in politics, vacuums do not stay empty for long. Someone has to step in and make a decision. And more, that someone is the president.
But is this power shift actually a good thing? Well, there are two main ways to look at it. As you can see here, the substitutes view on the left basically sees power as a zero-sum game. If Congress is weak, the president gets stronger and can step in to get stuff done. But the complements view on the right says, hold on, the branches need each other. A weak Congress doesn't create a strong president. It creates a weaker, less effective government for everybody.
You can see that substitutes idea in action really clearly. Remember when Congress refused to fund the border wall? Well, President Trump just used emergency powers to move the money around himself. A unified Congress probably could have stopped that. But, as this quote points out, a divided one couldn't. The president basically substituted his own action for Congress's inaction. But, and this is a really big but, while a president might look more powerful in the moment, that complements perspective reveals a much bigger, more systemic problem. It turns out that relying on the president to get around a broken Congress actually makes the entire system of government weaker and way less stable. See, an executive order from a president is not a real substitute for a law passed by Congress. And this cycle right here shows you why. Let's take the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan.
Congress wouldn't act on climate change, so the president issued a rule. But because it wasn't a solid law, it got stuck in legal challenges for years. And then, the very next president came in and just reversed it. You end up with this policy roller coaster that's unstable, unpredictable, and ultimately pretty ineffective.
And this instability isn't just some abstract concept. It has very real consequences. When Congress can't pass a budget, government agencies are left guessing how much money they have. Federal officials, the people actually trying to do the work, use words like unacceptable and debilitating. One described it as being like sand in the gears of government, slowing everything down and making long-term planning impossible.
And on top of all that, there's a human cost. This constant uncertainty takes a real toll. Studies have shown that when these budget delays get worse, federal employees are 15% more likely to think about quitting. That means we're seeing a brain drain of experienced, dedicated public servants right when we need them the most.
Okay, so let's tie all this together. What's the big takeaway here? Why does this long-term trend of polarization and gridlock actually matter to you? Well, it's about way more than just political fights on TV. It's about the fundamental ability of our government to function and solve the huge problems that affect all of us.
So here's the bottom line. It's a chain reaction. This deep ideological divide leads directly to congressional gridlock. That gridlock, as we've seen, paralyzes the government's most basic jobs. So presidents try to fill that void with unilateral action. But those actions are legally shaky and often get erased by the next person in office. The end result isn't a stronger presidency. It's a weaker, more volatile, and less effective government for absolutely everyone.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty sobering final question. You think about the massive challenges we face, from climate change to the economy to national security. These things require stable, long-term solutions. But if the very institutions we created to solve these problems are basically at war with themselves, who is left to do the job?